You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jesper Schmidt.
Hello, I'm Jesper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 133 of the AmWritingFantasy podcast, and we are talking about how to write well today. And I suppose this could be both a very broad topic as well as a very narrow one, Autumn.
Yes, when I saw the topic for this one this morning, I was like, oh, this is the one where we're like, oh yeah, we'll come up with some tips. It'll be fine. I'm thinking, I wish we had done something more specific. So, but I sat down and I wrote out some tips. I did my homework for this one, I promise.
Wow. That's good. So you're probably going to have some very, very good tips today.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a couple of them I think you probably already have on your list. And I know you already have a list, so I'm not that worried.
Yes, I do have a list, yes.
I just knew that.
But you are sort of melting away over there in the US at the moment?
Yeah, I don't like warm weather. I always laughed when I was in science class and found out that there's a fly that I think if it gets above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, there's some protein in its brain that unwinds and it kind of like falls over and acts dead until you cool it down.
Really?
I'm like, yeah, there really is. And when I heard that, I'm like, it's true. I always said my brain kind of just like goes when it gets too warm. When I get too warm, I'm just not myself. And I'm like, it's true. And it's about 85 degrees. Definitely my threshold. And it's supposed to be cooler today. I think it's the upper 80s. It's been in the 90s, but it's high humidity. Like literally there's thunderstorms around. So we're at 80 to 90% humidity. You walk outside and it's like breathing water. And it's just, I can't do that. Just no.
So you're gonna fall over any minute now and act dead until somebody comes and cools you down?
Yeah, so if you're suddenly left in charge of the podcast on your own, if people are listening and you're like, where's Autumn? Well, I passed out. It's fine.
Please don't.
I got a cool drink. I did turn off my AC for the recording. So, listeners, I care about you. The sound quality, I turned off my AC, which means we're going to wrap this one up quick.
Yeah, so in about 10 minutes, we're going to be done and out of here.
That's right. Come on. Oh, but that's okay. It'll be, I don't know if you saw the Instagram picture, but I took my dog. I adulted very well. I took my dog to the vet and he did very well. And he was so excited to get out of the cabin because, Adam's been away. Right. He's been up north. So it's just been me and him. And it's been too warm to go for a walk. He looks like a fizzy gig with legs. Okay. If anyone needs to picture my dog, he's a fizzy gig with legs. Small legs, very small legs. And so I haven't been walking him. It's way too hot for him. He was bred for northern Scotland. He does not like the heat either. But he was so excited to go somewhere to the vet. He was like whining in the car. He never whines, but the whole time he's like, he was just chattering away. And we got back from the vet. We got out of the vet, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I'm like, "You want to go walkies, don't you?" And so, even though it was so hot, I drove him to a nice. There's only so many places around here that there's forested and water. Vermont does not have a ton of water compared to Maine, where I used to live, and so we did this hike around this lake, and I threw him in, had him go chase frogs. He is a predator dog, so he loves chasing small creatures like frogs.
Small defenseless creatures.
Yeah, he likes killing things. He's a blood cold murderer. I sleep next to him every night.
He's like a mini dragon.
He is. That's where he's been the inspiration for two of my small sidekick characters. And but by the time we got to the top part of the hike, I just looked at him, said I didn't bring a swimsuit, but screw it. And I jumped in with him and we had a little bit of a swim. It was good.
Nice.
So how are things on your side? Yeah.
Well, I think for the most part, it's just a lot of sports on TV these days, to be honest.
It's exciting, though, that we have sports again.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, and we are of course recording a bit ahead of time here because we are trying to bank some episodes to cover for summer vacation. Where of course we're still gonna release episodes even though we're gonna be on vacation. So we're trying to pre-record. So that's just to say that what I'm about to mention now already took place some time ago by the time you listen to this. So that's why it might seem off a bit time-wise. But anyway, we watched the World Cup final in ice hockey this past weekend.
Oh, nice.
And it was between Canada and Finland.
Oh, those are two good teams. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a nerve-wracking experience. As the listener might know, my wife is Finnish, and my sons are also Finnish citizens, as well as Danish. So,
nice.
You can work out who we were rooting for.
Canada!
Not really. But honestly, I felt so bad for my youngest son because during it went to overtime, and then I don't know if it was like a couple of minutes or something into I don't remember, but into the overtime, one of the Finnish players makes like the slightest mistake.
Oh no.
And on this level in the World Cup final, just the slightest mistake, it does not go unpunished.
Oh.
So Canada scored the winning goal as a result.
Darn.
And my youngest son, he was so sad that he started crying.
Oh.
He was so sad. And even the next day when he woke up, and I always ask him in the morning when the boys wake up, I always ask him how they slept. Mm-hmm. And he said, not really good. Oh. He was so sad. I felt so sorry for the little guy. It just meant so much to him to win that final, and then they didn't.
He's gonna need therapy. He's gonna remember this. 20 years from now, he'll remember it. I'm sure. He's like, I'm
pretty sure he will. Yeah.
Oh.
It was it was not good. But we have a new chance now, though, because the European Championship in soccer are kicking off this week.
Oh,
so
nice.
And actually, on Saturday, Denmark will play against Finland.
Oh, that's cruel. So who do you root for in the family? Jeez.
You see, that's quite a dilemma.
Yeah.
It's so much a dilemma. But to be honest, I think it's worse for my sons than it is for me because, I'm born and raised in Denmark. So, yeah, of course, I root for Denmark.
Right.
But for
They're
them,
both.
that's a tough one because they are both.
Yeah.
So who do you root for? I don't know.
I'll make them draw straws and then they get switched halfway through. It's just with the family 2 and 2, and that's fair. That's just the way it's gonna be.
Yeah, my son's soccer coach actually asked him, so how are you gonna handle the fact that Finland plays against Denmark? And he was sort of looking into the sky for a moment, thinking, and then he said, "Well, I think I'm gonna sort of paint down the middle, and then I'll have Finland and then Denmark, one on each side."
You're so cute.
Yeah.
They're adorable.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy podcast.
Okay, so I noticed that the AmWritingFantasy Facebook group has passed 5,000 members now.
Actually, saw that
a bit more.
Too. Yeah.
I think we had 5,200 or something when I checked this morning.
And goodness knows by the time this is released, it's probably going to be 6,000. It's crazy in there. It's so exciting.
It's a lot of fantasy authors in one place already.
It really is. We're a very powerful and, well, I'd say in the group, we're not even that quiet. We're quite feisty, but it's fun. And chatty and supportive and talk fantasy art and characters and life and promotions. There's always something going on in there.
Yeah, for sure. When I posted about the podcast episode where we talked about the worst things you could ever do to a character, that was episode 128, and I laughed so much at Terry Ann's response. Did you see that one?
No, I have to go in and see it. I haven't been in there. I had a small computer swapping issue that we'll discuss later, but yeah, I was kind of absorbed into fixing a problem, so no, I didn't go see it. But no, what did Terry Ann say? She's pretty funny.
Yeah, and remember, we're talking about bad things to do against characters here, so this response from Terry Ann is of course in that nature and therefore also pretty nasty. So did you still want to hear it?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so she said, quote, I have one that I didn't realize until after the fact, that I killed everyone she loves. Her parents, her lover, her adoptive mother, one of her children. I'm pretty sure if she ever met me, she would slap me, end quote.
Oh, yeah. I can see that. I think in that episode I said I always feel bad for my favorite characters because I'm so mean to them, but I know they can take it, but I'm so mean to them. As you said when I was going through my cursed phase this year, you're like, well, you're the hero in some story, and the author thinks that you're gonna, you need to be tortured a little bit for some character development. Yeah, that's great. Love it.
Yeah. Imagine you could talk to them in real life, and they were like, "Why are you doing all this to me?" Well, on the other side, you'll come out a better person. Just trust me. It's just like, no, I don't want to trust you. Stop doing this to me.
I want an easy day. Darn it. Yes. So whenever you're yelling into the universe of this is so unfair and unjust, think about your characters talking to you. That's how they feel.
Yeah, could I just for once have one single chapter where nothing bad happens, please?
No. It's a lull. You're healing because you're unconscious. No.
Yeah, indeed, yes.
Oh, no. The group has definitely been so much fun recently, so I do love it over there.
Yeah. So if you, dear listener, haven't joined us yet, just search for AmWritingFantasy in the group section of Facebook and you will find us.
Yes.
And on to today's topic.
Actually, I noted that Ernest Hemingway had the following tips when it comes to writing well. So I thought that was probably an interesting place to start. So he said,
sounds good.
He said you should start, or you should use short sentences and also use short first paragraphs. What do you think of those two tips to start off on?
I would say use varied sentences, but I definitely think a short lead-in sentence, especially for like your first people work so hard on that first line of their novel, but I sometimes think just a short kind of punchy one that makes you go, huh? Is a fantastic way of opening a story and keeping that first paragraph kind of short. But I would definitely say, I've noticed this and I've talked with other authors about this currently, because of the size of reading screens, like Kindle screens are kind of small and people read on their phones. Shorter paragraphs and shorter sentences are definitely becoming the norm, because you don't want to read something that is literally a wall of text on your phone screen. So paragraphs have gotten down to like 2 sentences, which sometimes I think that's crazy, but I also have to admit, whenever I see something that's longer than like 3 sentences, I'm like, oh, for goodness sakes.
So you could, in some way, you could say Ernest Hemingway was way ahead of his time. He was thinking about the Kindle before it even existed.
Exactly. He was ahead of the curve.
He nailed it.
He did. I do like some Hemingway quotes, because he's the one who said, write drunk, edit sober. I'm like, yeah, that's wonderful writing advice.
Yeah, I'm not sure convinced about that one, but it's fun at least. But
it is. Write tipsy then. Be drunk on writing. I did actually just see that as a famous quote by somebody else, to always be drunk on your writing because it'll keep you inspired.
Okay, yeah. That's one of those fancy quote things that sounds really good, but in reality, it's probably not really like that.
Probably not.
But I don't know. I sort of have some things that sort of, it's both here and there and whatever. So there was no like particular order to this stuff, to be honest.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
It's just it's just some thoughts about this and that here and there.
Well, how about we both share? You share a thought, and I'll share a thought, and I'm sure we have some thoughts in common, because I know one of mine is totally already on your list. I already know it.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. So, do you want me to start?
Sure. Since you volunteered, go ahead.
You can start. It's okay if you want to. If you feel like that's so important, then
if you're intimidated and want me to go first, I can do that.
Just make up your mind. Do you want to go first, or you want me?
Go. You share. I'm gonna melt here. Come on.
Yeah. Quick. Yeah. Well, I think for a start, there is something to be said about using like simple and direct language.
Yes.
I think clarity brings a lot in order to improve one's writing. So, but I think as well, I want to say that there are no like real fixed rules that you need to follow, and there's nothing like once you've learned these rules, then your writing will be the best it can ever be.
No.
That doesn't exist.
No.
And I feel like that's probably one of the best things to get out there before we even get any further into this topic.
No, I totally agree. And actually that was it's not on my list, but it was one of my thoughts is there are a few rules for writing, but at the same time, there really aren't. Like I said, one of my favorite poems is the Jabberwocky, which is 100% nonsensical words, but I love it because it's so much fun to say. So you don't have to even use real language. You can completely make it up and be famous for centuries because it is such a fun poem. So there really aren't any rules, but you need to take everything we say and everything that editors, other authors, other readers say and figure out what fits your style and what you want to create with your writing. But you should also, if you're just learning, following some of the top guidelines will help you maybe figure out where you're going with your own author voice and style.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as well that, I mean, of course, we're gonna share some tips here, and of course, it's not that one should just ignore tips, right? It's good to
No.
take on board good advice and so on, and figure out what works for you. But at the same time, I think the point is just don't follow it blindly.
Yes. Always be purposeful. Yes, I think that makes sense. But for your first one, where you talked about brevity, I mean, I agree. That's such a... there's so many. There are so many quotes about, kill your darlings, cut out the flowery language. If the fewer words that you can use to say something really helps. You don't need to be over prosaic. There are some genres, maybe the literary genres and stuff, where those flowery prosaic languages are fun and they're more accepted, but mostly, I mean, fantasy has some beautiful descriptions, but then it has a lot of, action and things happening and punchy language. I especially love short, punchy sentences, and then I'll have, some really long ones. Yeah. So figure out, do some varied, but I recently had an editor say that they had never read a story, I think, how did she say it? That, that was so well described and so vivid and real, but use such minimal amount of words. I'm very minimalistic, I guess, in my word choice. I don't repeat myself, but I don't have tons of weird new words. I want the story to shine, not how I say the story.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
All right. So you ready for my first tip?
Yeah, for sure.
Somehow this became a competition again, I think.
That's. I was just thinking about it before, and then I thought, well, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to draw attention. Because the point of this episode is really not to make one of our top 10 sort of competition list at all. So I'm going to stay away from that, and I'm just going to listen to your advice now.
All right. Well, mine it's a typical one that you'll hear everywhere, but I have a specific purpose for it. But I would say if you want to learn to write well, you do need to read, and read in your genre. But I would say don't just read. My advice is actually to take your favorite book and rip it apart and find out why it is your favorite book. What makes it tick? What is the plot? How are characters introduced? What are the sentence lengths? What is your favorite scene? Don't just read it, but actually pull it apart and look under the hood and see what's there. It's like your own little study, if you're in high school, it's your private study test or whatever when you're going to work on your own. So do that. It really helps, I think, to look at something you absolutely adore and not just say, I love it, it's my favorite book, but find out why. What in it do you really love? And you will learn probably more from that than I think I did in my college classes on writing. So go and tear it apart. Look at adverb use. That'll really tell you in your genre how often you should be using adverbs, how often you should be using said versus growled or whispered. Look at your favorite story and don't mimic it, but pull it apart, see why you like it, put it back together in your own style, and see what you create.
Yeah, I think I remember you said at some point as well that when you needed to get your head into the right sort of writing mentality or writing space, then you read a bit of George R. R. Martin, I think you said at some point, and then you're right back in where you want to be.
Yeah, there's something about his writing that is so fluid and concrete and his deep point of view that I can read. I have a few favorite paragraphs and pages that I can read one of his, and it instantly resets my mind to this is the level of writing I want to do, and I can get back into my own voice, but it reminds me of the voice that I'm trying to find.
Yeah. I'm still struggling with that, to be honest. I fully agree with your response or your advice in terms of reading a lot in this genre, and I do that as well. I'm always reading a book, one book or the other. But I think I don't know why, but I'm really struggling with finding something that I really like. Most of I try to even pick up stories that are hugely popular and stuff like that, and I just don't. They don't engage me very well. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm just weird. I don't know. But
I
yeah.
don't disagree. The last 3 or 4 books I've picked up, I've been frustrated and a little disappointed, and yeah, I'm trying really hard to find something I'm enjoying. I'm actually thinking I want to go read I've been sticking to like epic fantasy and regular fantasy, heroic fantasy. I actually think I want to go read some literary fantasy, which has a stronger emphasis on foreshadowing and really deep plots, as well as really strong characters. They sometimes don't do as well in the characters, but I think I just want to cut my teeth on something with some really strong plot lines, because if I read something else that is nonsensical, I'm going to bash my head against the wall or my Kindle or something.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention the name of either the book or the author here, but I am reading one that is like insanely popular at the moment. I'm only, okay, to be honest, I'm only like 15% into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very long book, like fantasy books sometimes are. But it's just not engaging me at all. The writing is okay, but it's in the past episode we talked about writing in deep point of view, which is the way we write, and that is so much more engaging. And this is not written in deep point of view, so it's a bit like, yeah, I don't know, it's a bit boring. But that's off topic now. But it's more, it was just your tip there made me think about how even sometimes if you pick up some very, very popular books and you start reading them, they might not really do much for you. So
yeah,
but again, that only supports the fact that you should read a lot, because you keep reading different books and so on.
Yeah, and that's why I said
find what you like.
Don't just pull apart any book. Find whatever is your favorite book.
Yeah,
read that one and figure out why it's your favorite. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, that's a good advice.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, then the next one here it might be the one that I feel is the most important one, to be honest, maybe. Because this is very simple in some sense, but also very complicated. But it is really figuring out what you want to say.
Oh, I like that.
Because anyone can string sentences together, but you need to have a story to tell.
Yes.
And outlining really helps here, to be honest.
I was going to ask if you're hinting that you should learn to plot.
Well, yeah, we of course do have a full step-by-step book on how to plot a novel, but if you're interested, you can search for plot development on Amazon and you'll find it. But that was really not why I was mentioning it. The reason I'm mentioning it is that going through the motions of trying to understand your story before you just start writing, even if you're not a plotter and you don't want to do like a full plot or whatever, but trying to get your mind around what is this story really about and what is it that I really want to say, that will help your writing tremendously and make the story so much better than when you're just sort of doing a brain dump on the page.
I agree. I mean, whether you outline or, like I said, we have YouTube videos on just a 15-minute, half an hour outline, which can do so much for guiding you in a direction, even if you're a pantser. But I think knowing the purpose of the story, maybe the theme of the story, all those things can really, one, it'll help you write faster because you'll know you're going in the right direction. You're not just wanderingly through the maze lost, but it'll really help you make a better story and you'll write better because, I mean, the point is to write a story and to tell tales. There's times that I'm like, oh, this is so cool, I want to go into that, but I don't have to be a short story somewhere else. If it doesn't really involve what is important for this story and this plot or the subplot, it doesn't really need to be in there. So that'll help you with your writing, and so that you're not having readers. We're coaching with other authors, and you don't want your reader going, why did you mention this name? Why did you bring this up? And then you never mentioned it again. Oh my gosh, I hate it when I read that as a reader, that you're like, why did you tell me this if you never do anything with it?
And that's a good point about the YouTube videos. So we have I don't know, I will guess more than 150 videos probably on the AmWritingFantasy YouTube channel. So if you need to find some inspiration about how to do a plot for a series or a shorter plot overview or probably whatever you can think of almost, go to the AmWritingFantasy YouTube channel, because there are actually YouTube videos on there that is not on this podcast feed.
That's right. Because the first ones before we switched,
before we switched to podcasting, we did YouTube videos. So there's probably 100 videos, I would guess, that is not on the podcast feed. So go and explore a bit there if you need some help. You'll definitely find videos that'll help you.
When you taught me what B-rolls were, those were some really good videos. So I think we still get comments on them. So I know people are still watching them.
Yeah, only warning is that some of those videos are very old. So the first videos on that channel, those are, well, not professionally produced, let's put it like that. The advice are good, but the production value is not the best.
Okay, we all improve in time, right?
Yeah, indeed.
All right. You ready for my second tip?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Mine is learn to craft very vivid characters. And I was going to say realistic, but I don't actually mean realistic, because I hate to say it, real people can be a little boring. So you want someone whose personality, who a friend once described this other person to me, that they were like a motorboat when everyone else was in a canoe, and their wake just kind of toppled you right over. That's kind of what you want your characters to be, that whole idea of larger than life, but you also want them to feel like they really could exist. So they're three-dimensional, they have likes and dislikes. Those are really important by creating a character that is just, overpowers maybe in so many ways, but also feels like someone you really want them to be your friend, or you desperately do not want them to be your enemy. Create those types of characters and people are going to be like, wow, that is amazing.
No, I agree. And characters are, those are why people come back to stories. It is not the overall plot, and what really engages the reader is the character. So fully agree that is insanely important. It might not be directly, it depends on how we interpret improving the writing. It's not specific writing per se, but again, my point about figuring out what you want to say is not specific to the sentences either, right? So, but it's about storytelling, I guess.
Yes, how to tell your story better. How's that? Yeah,
indeed. So I have two ones that are short and quick, and one of them you already touched upon. So I'll just get those out of the way, and then I'll move on to another one.
Okay.
So the first one you touched upon, that don't use complicated words. So I had that one as well. And then another variation of that is use different metaphors that what you used to see. Find new ways of saying something that will improve the writing quite a lot as well. So that was two small easy ones.
That's a good one.
Get out of the way. And then the next one I have here is any words that can be stripped out without losing the meaning, cut it out every time. Because the more words you remove, the better the story will get.
I agree. There's probably a point where you've removed too many, and occasionally...
it was without losing meaning.
That's true, without losing meaning. And occasionally I do, because I'm I'm the editor hat usually on in the two of us, and
Yeah.
I'm often taking out words, but then I'll sometimes stop and be like, I need an adverb. And I'll be like, I'm adding something massively something, or massively booming, something I'm adding in there, because those words are fun. It's good to remember to put in some of those fun adverbs occasionally. But there's times where I'm editing and I'm like, okay, there's 4 words that I can turn into 1. And I will always switch to something that is Ernest Hemingway must be, I'm channeling him at times. I just really like to shorten up the sentences, to drop all the does. They call them sticky sentences, which is what I learned through Pro Writing 8. I didn't know they had a term, but when you have something that has all those filler words like in, the, a, all those little ones that really don't have meaning, they're just the little bits there that kind of connect everything with, to, the more of those stuff you can remove, the punchier and more concrete your sentences are. And the more you get out of them, you don't get lost in all those little words that you're like, where are we going with this sentence? You don't want to have those sticky ones. They make people just stop and go, wait, I have to start over again. I don't know what you were saying.
No, I agree. Absolutely.
All right. So I actually, one of the ones on my list was learn to plot, but I think we kind of covered that one. It's important.
Kind of, yeah.
But I would say for fantasy, again, this is not a sentence structure one, which is funny. I'm the editor and I'm avoiding all the sentence structure ones. But I would say learn to world build something unique, and then learn how to share it with readers without info dumping or confusing the crap out of them.
Right.
One of the stories I just recently read, which is interesting because I actually meant to mention this one with the characters as well. But again, I won't mention any names, but it was an impressive world. And this was not Brandon Sanderson, I will say that. It was someone else. A very impressive world, really in depth, all this history. I was so freaking confused. He did a horrible job explaining any of how it related to the world and who these people and gods and all these things were. I literally I finished the book and I kind of had an idea, and then I read through the glossary and then I'm like, oh, nope, still don't get it. And it's sad. I had to literally just suspend my own questioning, or I would never have gotten past probably the 3rd chapter, because I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Will you please explain what the frig you're talking about? He just horrible. And he was the same way with some characters. He literally didn't describe a character, a sidekick, until 3/4 of the way through the novel. Up until that point, I knew one thing about this sidekick.
Okay.
Of how it looked. 3/4 of the way through the novel, I finally got a description. I was like, thank you.
That's weird.
I've got to now revise everything I've thought up till now.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
And he'd also did the same thing with it was one of the first times I've read a book where I can honestly I see a lot of authors saying, I don't know how to write men if they're a woman, or a woman saying I don't know how to write a man saying I don't know how to write women. It's one of the few times I can say you have 2 types of women in your novel: assassin, cold-hearted, or mousy and insane. And that was it. So when I say write vivid characters of every genre, color, race. No one should be one of 2 characteristics, because I finished it going, I don't care who's buying this book, they're not women. I read it and I'm kind of like, this is almost insulting. I'm either...
Okay.
These are my 2 types of characters. So learn to world build and learn to describe things, and make sure you describe things appropriately, but don't info dump. So that circled back to what my point was, is you should create something amazing. This world that I just read was really, truly unique and amazing. I think from what the hints I got out of it, I assume it seemed it under the hood from what I was gathering. I just don't know how it works.
It reminds me of the advice to give when if you are to read the Silmarillion. Have you ever read that one?
No, I haven't. I will one
Okay.
day, I swear.
Yeah, I have it on my Kindle, and I'm going to read it for the second time. But it's a very nerdy book to read, of course, because it's not really a story as such. It's more like a world compendium. But their advice when reading the Silmarillion, so I can give this to you now, since you haven't read it. But the advice is just read it. You're going to get like 250 names of this son's father to that blah blah blah, and do not try to understand who's who. Just read and ignore it, because you are gonna get so lost, and you have no idea 5 pages later who is actually who here, because it's impossible to follow.
All right.
And there is full glossaries and all that, but just forget it. Just read it for the history of the world, and just ignore all the people.
Okay. All right.
Honestly, that's the only way to read the Silmarillion without going insane.
I will keep that in mind. Though, speaking of that, I don't know if you saw. I just saw shared on Patreon that how to create your own magic book. I'm just gonna stick with my own philosophy of how to do that, and I'll ignore the similarity. I can't even pronounce it today.
Silmarillion. Yeah.
I told you, my brain slowly. Those proteins are
you're
unraveling.
melting now. You're melting. We need to speed up.
All right, but yeah. So I will save that for later in cooler weather.
Okay.
Okay.
I found a piece of advice from George Orwell.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not something new to most of us, I think, but at the same time, it's a good reminder, and that is not to use passive voice when you can use active voice.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah, so the example Orwell uses was, the man was bitten by the dog. That is very passive.
That is very passive.
And not very engaging. And it is better to say the dog bit the man. Yes. That's active, and it's much more engaging. And again, we talked about deep point of view early on. And if you write in deep point of view, you usually do not have the passive voice problem, as much at least.
Yes, and it's funny, I have seen that with editing a lot of books, and I do it too, that I often see something in passive voice that you don't even have to switch the noun. They have like, she was sitting down. You can just change that to she sat down.
Yeah.
I've noticed that if you see a was and then a verb ending in an ing, I can guarantee you that is the verb that should be where the was or was is.
Was is.
This just became a Dr. Seuss episode. But I've seen it so many times, maybe because I've been like editing like crazy since like May or April or something, but I've seen that so often in so many different authors, and I'm like, I don't see anyone else having this rule, but if you have a was and a verb ending in ing, you get rid of the was and turn the verb into the active choice, and that's all you need. It's perfect, and it'll make your writing that much stronger because you'll be an active voice, and it will not be this kind of passive, is that she was sitting down? No, she sat. She just sat down. It's fine.
Yeah. No, indeed. Yeah.
And it's funny.
Exactly.
My next one was to write informative and punchy dialogue. So I think we covered that.
We did. Yeah.
I like punchy dialogue. My editor sometimes doesn't like my punchy dialogue, but I like my punchy dialogue. But so this is actually my last one on my list, is to add humor to your writing. So. Ooh. Yeah, a lot of authors. Tough. It's a tough one for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of authors use romance or friendship as a good subplot, as a way of binding characters, getting that emotional investment from the reader. But there's that old saying that if you can laugh together, you can stay together when they talk about marriages. It's also true with your characters and with your readers. If you can make them laugh out loud, they will kind of love your book just a little bit more than even a romance scene. So keep that in mind. I like snarky characters and I love sarcasm. So yeah, you're going to definitely find that in my books. But sometimes I've had a few maverick maniac kind of characters, and even the book I just read that I couldn't understand the world, and I didn't really like some of the female characters because they were like one of two types, except for the hero's wife, who ended up in prison for 3/4 of the novel doing absolutely nothing. But anyway, there were parts there were parts of the book I absolutely adored, because some of the banter between characters and this kind of devil may care sarcastic attitude, I'm like, dude, I like you. So that overcomes quite a lot of sins.
No, I agree fully. Adding humor makes a huge difference, but I personally find it very, very difficult. Also to come up with something that feels like smart enough, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Smart enough humor is difficult, I think.
And I do think it's funny, because I know when the best scenes I come up with are one of those ones like, you're in the middle of cooking dinner or something. You're like, oh, this is the perfect dialogue. And you like have to basically burn everything or shut everything off. And you run and write it down. There's something about humor where I think it is something that comes, you can't create it out of nothing. It comes from inspiration. But when it comes, you're like, oh, this is perfect. So I do think, but it's, if you can develop that, learn, I don't know, learn improv. That would be a good class to learn to do some fun humor and just come up with some stuff. Yeah, but I think it would add a lot to a lot of stories that I read, and they seem good. But man, if you can make me laugh, and especially if you snort tea, my goal in every interaction with people is to make them snort a hot or a very cold liquid. That is perfect.
Oh yeah, that's good advice. I have 2 more, and then I think that's it. They're short, so the first one is just very simple, but make sure to hook the reader.
Oh yes,
that's simple, but very effective.
It is, and I think, not to make it take longer, but we say hook, and people understand the concept, but I think sometimes they don't realize what that actually means in concrete advice, and it can be anything. You just want to make them read the next sentence, whether it's curiosity, whether it's an emotional outcome. You just want to make them keep reading, and that's all hooking is. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, from emotions to curiosity to, I don't know, excitement. Foreshadowing, excitement. Yeah, that's all. Yeah. It's finding that reason that you hit the paragraph or the period and you go, no, I got to know what comes next.
Yeah, indeed. And especially with the first chapter, of course, that's important. Yes. And the next one is also very short, but just sort of general good advice. It's not really about the writing itself, but it's more taking a break from it and walk away from your writing, leave it alone for a bit, and then come back and have a look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. That's usually going to help a lot to improve the text.
I think so too, especially if you're editing or you're writing and you do hit that wall, especially to me, editing, if the words are starting to run together and you're just kind of fed up, or if you find yourself trying to finish on an artificial deadline that you are completely 100% in control of, walk away from it. Don't force yourself. I admit I just kind of took a weekend break. I meant to edit a zillion chapters, and instead I finished reading a book, and then I did a really good drawing. Sorry, Jesper, I didn't get much editing done, but I felt so much better when I opened it up on Monday. I was like, oh, boom, 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 just got stuff done. It flowed so nicely. So everyone needs a break every once in a while.
A break is good once in a while, for sure.
It is.
Yeah. Good. And I think sort of maybe to round things off, I think it's worth saying that the more you write, the better you'll get at it.
Yes.
And why I'm saying that is because some people think that you're like natural born as a good writer, but that's not the case. Practice is the only thing that'll make you better.
Yeah.
And of course it is challenging, especially because writing is very subjective, then that only makes it even more challenging. But you get better as you go along, and it also gets easier as you go along. So,
yes. Look at me. I sometimes could do things in reverse, but in general, it gets easier.
But you also Faye Autumn, so.
So I live in reverse sometimes too. But no, I agree. I mean, when I look back at my debut novel versus what I'm writing now, You get better. You get better. Your next book, there's a certain point where you have done the best you can for your skill level right now. Just go to your next story. It's okay. And just keep writing.
Amen. So next Monday, we are doing something slightly different because we have collected a bunch of questions from our listeners and we are going to answer as many as we can.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the Am Writing Fantasy podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jesper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the Am Writing Fantasy podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.